The Ukraine war is set to complete 6 months in a few days from now. It was supposed to be a swift operation for Russia. It is dragging on and escalating. With every passing day, the threat of a nuclear disaster is rising. Yesterday, we told you about the blasts at Russia's military base in Crimea. Today, we have the images and news of retaliation. Russia is firing rockets. At the center of this rocket battle is Europe's largest nuclear power plant. Statements and warnings are flying in tandem with these rockets. The United Nations Security Council has called an emergency meeting. What will this escalation lead to? Sources have told us that the West is prepared for the long haul. They'll keep feeding this war with weapons as long as Ukraine is prepared to fight. But with this escalation, is Zelensky making the final gambit? On Gravitas tonight, we'll discuss.
Вообще не хочу уезжать из Крыма из-за лучше. Как здесь классно.
Привыкла, да?
Я привыкла здесь, как в своем доме жили. Настолько все душевно. По-домашнему.
That was a Russian family fleeing Crimea, and they're not the only ones doing it. An exodus has begun. Russians are leaving Crimea in droves. Take a look at this. Major traffic jams, cars lining up on the highway, and these videos have been posted by Russians themselves. What were they doing in Crimea? Holidaying. Russians come here for a summer holiday to experience what they call the Crimean Riviera. But now they're in a hurry to leave. And that's because the war has come to Crimea. Major blasts rocked the region yesterday. Today, satellite images showed destroyed Russian jets. This looks like a targeted strike. A series of bombings destroyed a Russian base in Crimea. Moscow says it was just an ammunition explosion. But now there is growing evidence that Ukraine carried out this assault. And Russia has launched a deadly counterattack. Russian forces have conducted rocket strikes, and that too near a nuclear power plant. 14 civilians have died in this operation. World leaders fear much worse, though, a nuclear disaster. The United Nations Security Council has called an emergency meeting. This is our cover story tonight. We'll start with Crimea. Today we got a closer look at the Russian base in Crimea thanks to some satellites in space. I have some pictures for you. This is what Russia's Saki air base looked like before the blast. There was a runway and multiple aircraft surrounded by green spaces. This is what Russia's airbase looked like before. And this is what it looks like now. The entire base has been flattened, presumably by bombs. Warplanes have been blown up. At least 7 Russian jets look completely destroyed. There are large craters in the area. The leader of Crimea has shared the scale of the damage. His name is Sergei Aksionovas. He's a pro-Russian leader. This is what he said.
Unfortunately, we have 14 injured and 1 dead. We express our condolences to the families and loved ones. We have 62 multi-story buildings damaged. The inspection of individual residences is now being completed. There will be information about the damages there within a couple of hours. The explosions have been declared an emergency situation of regional significance. The number of people in temporary accommodation facilities is 252. They are all being provided with food. All accommodation standards are being met.
So one person, in fact, has died, 14 are injured, 62 multi-story buildings are damaged, more than 250 people have been moved to shelters. Remember, Russia claimed the damage was minimal, but these pictures and statements contradict those claims. The Russian base has suffered extensive damage. A simple explosion would not have done this. This, like I said, was a targeted strike, one that was most likely launched by Ukraine. Now remember, Kiev refuses to take responsibility, at least on the record. But off the record, senior Ukrainian military officials are talking, and we have some details. They say Ukraine's special forces were involved in this operation, and they were not working alone. Local resistance fighters in Crimea joined them in this mission. They're called partisans. They're like a group of guerrilla fighters. And this wasn't their first joint operation. Increasingly, Ukraine's forces are working with them. But they're involved only for specific missions. What kind of missions? Like targeted attacks behind enemy lines. So where have these partisans struck before? One of their recent operations was in Kherson. This is a major economic center in South Ukraine, or it used to be at least. Now Russians control it. Ukraine has been trying to take it back. The partisans were involved in recent operations there. They targeted Russian bases and ammunition depots in Kherson. So that's the story of what happened in Crimea. Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, is raising the stakes. Yesterday he was talking about taking Crimea back. Today he's eyeing the Donbas region.
If
almost 43,000 dead Russian soldiers do not convince the Russian command to find a way out of the war, then more fighting is needed, more results to convince them. Only yesterday the occupiers lost 10 aircrafts, 9 in Crimea and 1 in Zaporizhia region. The time will come when they will flee the Kharkiv region, Donbas, Crimea, and everyone who can help with that must do so.
Almost 6 months of war and a lot of lost territory later, it's hard to fathom where this confidence comes from. Sounds more like its final gambit, because Russia is not taking any of this lying low. It has upped the ante, and this time with a nuclear threat. Ukraine's Zaporizhia nuclear plant is under fire, and this plant is under Russian control. It has been since March. In recent weeks, this nuclear plant has seen multiple attacks. The latest one was yesterday. Russian forces fired rockets from here. Let me repeat that. The Russians fired rockets from a nuclear plant in Ukraine. Not 1 or 2, but 80 rockets, 80. Their target was the town of Maranets. 14 civilians died in the strike. Residential neighborhoods, apartment blocks, and administrative buildings were all damaged. And this does not even begin to cover how serious the situation is. The constant firing around this nuclear plant is a matter of concern. And this isn't just any other plant. The Zaporizhia nuclear plant is the largest in Europe. It has around 500 Russian soldiers now. They've turned the plant into a military base. Ukraine has tried to take it back, and now they've come to blows here. The attacks and counterattacks are taking place extremely close to critical safety systems and very close to radioactive materials. Ukraine's nuclear power operator, Inahuatom, is afraid. It is warning of a hydrogen leak. In fact, I have a statement with me from this company. This is what it says. Ukraine is calling on the international community to take immediate measures to force Russia to release the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant and hand over the power plant to the control of Ukraine for the sake of the safety of the whole world. The G7 has responded to this SOS call. It has urged Russian forces to leave and to allow Ukraine to take control of the plant. Needless to say, Russia will not act on G7 demands or even the United Nations demands. Nonetheless, the UN Security Council has called an emergency meeting. Fun fact, guess who's the current president of the UNSC? China. Also, these forums are just to make dramatic statements, you could say. Both Russia and China have the veto power. So any hopes of de-escalation because of such meetings are weak. The fact is, as this war intensifies, the world faces a greater risk of nuclear disaster. After 940 days, Xi Jinping could be stepping out of China. He did go to Hong Kong in June, but that barely counts as a foreign visit. This one does. Reports say Xi Jinping is traveling to Saudi Arabia. He's expected to arrive next week. Now, why is this visit important? Well, you already know one reason, we told you. Since the Wuhan virus pandemic, Xi Jinping has not left Chinese soil. His first trip outside the mainland was in the month of June. He traveled to Hong Kong. Other than that, 0 state visits for almost 940 days. Xi could have picked any country to end that streak, but he picked Saudi Arabia. It tells you where he is focusing. Another reason is that Joe Biden was there last month. The US president visited Saudi Arabia in the month of July. It was underwhelming, to say the least. No grand welcome, no intimate displays. It was like It was all very businesslike. Reports say Xi Jinping's welcome will not be like that. He is expected to make 3 stops in Saudi Arabia, the capital Riyadh, the coastal resort town of Jeddah, and finally Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's dream project, the mega city of NEOM. Plans are apparently underway for a grand reception. Thousands of Chinese banners are expected to be hoisted. Hundreds of dignitaries are being invited. Many are comparing it to Donald Trump's reception back in 2017. You might remember that. Now, that was a royal welcome. Trump was received with silver swords, extravagant gifts, and a strange yet regal glowing orb. Xi Jinping is expected to get a similar welcome. Compare that to what Joe Biden got, a lonely welcome at the airport, a damp fist bump, and no promises on increasing oil output. Makes you wonder, what is Saudi Arabia up to? After all, the US is their most important strategic partner. Even today, almost 60% of their weapons come from America. So why is Saudi Arabia pivoting east? We can think of 3 reasons. Number 1 is oil. In recent years, the US has become energy independent. They produce energy domestically, which is not the case with China. Beijing continues to rely on energy imports. In fact, they're the largest buyers of Saudi Arabian oil. Take a look at the comparison here. China buys crude worth $24 billion from Saudi Arabia. The US, just $6.5 billion. So Riyadh is playing the smart economic game here. Reason number 2 is the power vacuum in West Asia. The US is gradually withdrawing from the region. Their new focus is the Pacific, and that's bad news for the Arab states. It leaves them exposed to Iran and its proxies. Joe Biden has accelerated this pivot. He froze US military support for the war in Yemen. He also slowed down defense exchanges. So what does Saudi Arabia do? Find an alternative. Reason number 3 is policy certainty. China did condemn the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Did not, rather. They don't care about women's rights or minority rights or the war in Yemen. All they care about is political and strategic gains, and that works very well for Crown Prince MBS. With the US, he must pretend to care about human rights. With China, he doesn't have to. Which brings us to Xi Jinping. What is he hoping to achieve with this visit? The Chinese government is not giving away much. Earlier today, the spokesperson was asked about this reported visit. He said he had no information to give. Does that mean the visit is not happening? He did not say that. Guess we'll have to wait and see. But you can understand why China is eager to dominate West Asia. For starters, it is predominantly Muslim land, the perfect chance for Xi Jinping to launder his image. The Chinese government has jailed 1 million Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang. It has been labeled a genocide, but Saudi Arabia has nothing to say about it. The so-called leader of the Islamic world prefers Chinese money over Muslim rights. And that's one reason. Another is energy supplies. Xi Jinping, in fact, needs uninterrupted oil supplies to feed his growing industries. More so if there is war. You cannot fight without fuel in your tanks and jets. So secure energy supplies are high on Xi Jinping's agenda. And how do you achieve that? How do you ensure the US cannot cut you off from West Asian oil? By dominating this region. By making systematic investments in West Asia. Their first target was Iran. In 2020, you might remember this, Iran and China signed a 25-year agreement. China is set to invest $400 billion in Iran. Another target is Iraq. The war-torn country needs $88 billion for reconstruction. And guess what? China is already on the job. Last year, they secured a contract for $10 billion. Same with Saudi Arabia. MBS is looking to overhaul the Saudi economy, to move away from fossil fuels. That vision is heavy on infrastructure and aligns perfectly with the Belt and Road. Chinese firms are building the Green Dragon metro line in Mecca. Huawei is building cloud facilities in the kingdom. Put together, China has completed projects worth $40 billion in Saudi Arabia, $40 billion. The UAE is a similar case. In 2019, they signed a Belt and Road deal with China. Total value, more than $3 billion. Under this deal, China would invest in the port of Jebel Ali. And quick side note here, Jebel Ali is the busiest port of call for the US Navy. So the big picture is quite clear. While America was pivoting east, China was moving west. They've invested billions of dollars in West Asia, and now those investments are paying off. Unlike the US, China is not interested in regional politics, in Sunni-Shia rivalries, in proxy wars, or in human rights lectures. So naturally, the Arab states like China. The question is, are they picking Beijing over Washington? Well, right now, that seems far-fetched. Why pick one when you can do business with both? Chances are West Asia is playing the two world powers against each other. And if so, the plan is already working. Last week, the US approved two major arms deals, one each for Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Total value more than $5 billion. If Republicans retake power in Washington, that would increase. So West Asia is spoiled for choice right now. A rising China looking to displace the US, a desperate Russia looking for allies, and a wavering US eager to not lose ground. So Xi Jinping is making new friends as his old friends languish in misery. Like Gotabaya Rajapaksa, befriending China cost him dearly. His country ran out of money. Gota himself had to flee. It's been more than a month now, and he's still on the run. He went to the Maldives, then to Singapore, and now he's seeking shelter in Thailand. He's even got the permission to enter, but on two conditions. One, you cannot stay longer than 90 days, and two, do not conduct political activities on Thai soil. The Prime Minister of Thailand says this is just a humanitarian gesture, and that Gotabaya will eventually have to find another country to take refuge in. Here's more.
When Sri Lanka fell on hard days, he was lounging in his palace. Today, he's running out of options to hide. A month since he fled his homeland, Gotabaya Rajapaksa is still on the run. He's hopping countries to seek refuge. On July 12th, when protesters stormed his home, he left Sri Lanka and reached the Maldives. Sri Lankans living there protested, so within 48 hours, he left Malé. The next stop was Singapore. He relocated with his family and has been there ever since. On Thursday, his visa ran out. Singapore says it doesn't grant asylum requests. So Gotabaya will have to leave. Where is he going next? To Thailand. Reports say Gotabaya will reach Bangkok in the next 24 hours. Does he have the permission to enter? He does. According to the Thai Foreign Ministry, Gotabaya's request has been approved. He will be allowed to stay in Thailand because he still holds a diplomatic passport. This passport allows him to visit any country and travel without a visa. But there's a catch. He can only stay in Thailand for 90 days. That too, on a condition. He cannot conduct political activities on Thai soil or cause any trouble for the Thai leadership. A statement by Thailand's Prime Minister reads, "This is a humanitarian issue. We have made a promise that it's a temporary stay. No political activities are allowed, and this will help him find a country to take refuge in. In simpler words, this is not an asylum. You will have to leave." It's an embarrassing fall for Gotabaya Rajapaksa, once famously called the Terminator. Today he's living as an absconder, searching for a safe haven. He can't go back to Colombo. His successor says the time is not right. The Gota Go protests may have fizzled out, but anti-establishment rallies haven't. These images are from Tuesday, from a pro-democracy protest. It was called by trade unions to demand fresh elections and seek subsidies for the people. A day before, there was a protest seeking the release of jailed activists. And the day before that, protesters faced off with cops outside the presidential secretariat. On the economic front too, there's no relief. Sri Lanka is yet to secure an IMF bailout. An agreement was expected by August. It's been 11 days. There's no breakthrough yet, so the situation remains precarious, both for the people of Sri Lanka and their former leader turned fugitive. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
Sri Lanka's experience should be a lesson for all countries, especially those dealing with China. I hope Nepal is taking notes, because their foreign minister, Narayan Khadka, is on a state visit to China. On Wednesday, he met his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi. The meeting took place in Qingdao in eastern China. First, the big takeaways. These talks were happening in the shadow of the Taiwan standoff. Nepal did refer to that. Their foreign minister reaffirmed Nepal's commitment to the One China policy. He also supported China's position in Tibet, Xinjiang and Hong Kong. In other words, a clean chit from Nepal, for whatever it's worth. What did Wang Yi say in response? He promised unconditional support for Nepal's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Now, we weren't in the room, but kudos to Wang Yi if he kept a straight face while saying that. In late June, Nepalese citizens were protesting against China in Kathmandu. Do you know why? Because China was encroaching on their land. And now that same China is supporting Nepal's territorial integrity. Full marks for audacity. After the political niceties, the two leaders got down to business. China promised 2 packages for Nepal. One is an aid package worth $181 million. This includes fertilizers, medical items, laboratory equipment and staff training. The second is an investment package. It is worth almost $15 billion. China will give this $15 billion package and Nepal will invest this money in selected projects in 2022. Among them could be the trans-Himalayan network. Now, this is a big ticket project, the trans-Himalayan network. As the name suggests, it will straddle the Himalayas. The project includes cross-border railway and communication lines. Let me show you on the map. The Trans-Himalayan network would connect 2 cities, Kerung in southern Tibet and Kathmandu in Nepal. It was proposed way back in 1973 by Mao Zedong. Almost 5 decades later, it may finally happen. China will send experts to conduct feasibility studies this year, and if the science checks out, the project will go ahead. So that's the financial impact of Wednesday's meeting. A lot of aid and investments. What about the political impact? This was the first high-level visit to China under Sher Bahadur Deuba's government. Now, Deuba is not a communist. He belongs to the Nepali Congress Party. And traditionally, they have preferred closer ties with India. That's one reason why this visit to China is so important. The second reason is Sri Lanka. Nepal is taking a lot of financial commitments from China. A lot like Sri Lanka did. In fact, their national debt is already rising. It was 7% in the third quarter of this year. So the obvious question is this. Could Nepal be going the Sri Lanka way? So far, Kathmandu has preferred grants over loans. Even this latest package is a grant. It is not adding to Nepal's national debt. In fact, across South Asia, countries are realizing the problem with Chinese loans. Bangladesh is another example. Their finance minister recently spoke out against China's Belt and Road Initiative. I had that statement with me. This is what he said. Bangladesh's finance minister. Whatever the situation that is going on worldwide, everybody will be thinking twice before agreeing to this prospect. To this project, rather. And by this project, he means the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative. So South Asia is reconsidering Chinese loans. The question is, are they also reconsidering Chinese ties? From the looks of it, no, they aren't. Nepal has agreed to deepen bilateral cooperation with China. Bangladesh wants their help to repatriate Rohingya refugees. Beijing is also offering incentives to Dhaka. 98% of Bangladesh exports will now be duty-free in China. Earlier it was 97%. So China remains a major player in South Asian geopolitics. How should India respond to all of this? To these engagements with Nepal and Bangladesh? The public reaction is often hostile, sort of like, how dare they talk to China? But remember, these are sovereign countries. Just like India hates foreign interference, so do Bangladesh and Nepal. These are proud and independent societies. So India's response must be measured. If China is making moves, India must counter them, not by lashing out, but by matching them. Sri Lanka is a good example of that. India has granted more than $4 billion in assistance to Sri Lanka, and that money is already paying off. We told you about this. Sri Lanka deferred a voyage by China's spy ship to Hambantota. The same strategy can be used with Nepal and Bangladesh. Investments, people-to-people ties, and most importantly, mutual respect. That must be the basis of India's relationship with South Asia. Now, in other news, North Korea has defeated the Wuhan virus, or so they claim. In just 3 months of reporting an outbreak, North Korea says it has exterminated the disease. There are no fresh cases, no fresh infections. Kim Jong-un is ecstatic. In fact, he celebrated this so-called achievement on Wednesday and called the victory a miracle, as his officials shed tears. Why is this victory a miracle? Because it was achieved without vaccines. North Korea did not vaccinate a single citizen. It apparently relied solely on the expertise and vision of Kim Jong-un. This story is beyond science. Take a look.
He has done the unthinkable. Kim Jong-un has defeated COVID-19, vanquished the Wuhan virus without vaccines, a feat that has bewildered scientists. These images are from Wednesday. What you see is a victory celebration, a grand event to mark COVID's demise. In attendance were thousands of unmasked officials. Their faces filled with pride in their leader. They clapped and cheered as Kim declared the triumph.
당중앙위원회와 공화국 정부를 대표하여
On behalf of the Party Central Committee and the Government of Democratic People's Republic of Korea, I solemnly declare the victory in the maximum emergency anti-epidemic campaign for exterminating the novel coronavirus that had made inroads into our territory and protecting the lives and health of the people.
Also present at the celebration was Kim's sister, North Korea's Iron Lady Kim Yo-jong. In a speech filled with profanities, she accused South Korea of sending the virus to the north. She also revealed how her brother got infected, a touching tale that moved the audience to tears.
Our leader was suffering from high fever during the days of this quarantine war, but he could not lie down for a moment as he was thinking about the people he was responsible for. We remember everything that the South Korean Conservative Party has done and how vicious they are, and how they are worse than the rubbish people who are less than animals and at the forefront of sending sloppy items.
Kim's victory is nothing short of a miracle, because if we go by North Korea's claims, COVID reached the Hermit Kingdom just 3 months back. The first official outbreak was confirmed on the 12th of May. They called the virus a fever, an unknown malignant disease. It infected 4.8 million people out of its population of 26 million. It even then claimed the lives of a few top military officials. 3 months and several state funerals later, Kim has cleansed North Korea of the virus. How exactly? Last we checked, North Korea had one of the world's worst healthcare systems, ill-equipped hospitals, few intensive care units, and no COVID-19 drugs or vaccines. No one in North Korea has got a single shot of vaccine, forget 2. How then did the country conquer the virus? It's a question many scientists are asking. They say North Korea's claims are deceitful, that Pyongyang is manipulating reality in order to help Kim maintain absolute power. Unfortunately, there's very little they can do to confirm their doubts. With or without the Wuhan virus, North Korea remains shut to the world.
Back here in India, a big debate is underway. At the center of this debate are freebies. The Supreme Court of India is warning against freebies. Now, if you follow Indian politics, you know what I mean. During every election season, every party is promising something or the other. Free electricity, free laptops, free food processors, free bicycles. The promises get more creative with every election cycle. The question is, are they sustainable? Can a country like India afford freebies? The Supreme Court is currently hearing this matter. Let me quote what the Chief Justice of India said. It is a serious issue. Ours is a welfare state. Some may say that they are paying taxes and it has to be used for developmental process. So both sides have to be heard by the committee. That's what the court has done. It has asked different stakeholders to brainstorm: the central government, the Niti Aayog or the Planning Commission, the Reserve Bank of India and the Finance Commission. So the best minds will huddle to decide the path forward. Meanwhile, the political battle has already begun. Recently, India's Prime Minister spoke out against the freebie culture. He said the country's youth must be guarded against it. But the Chief Minister of Delhi disagrees. He says, if it is financially sustainable, then why not? So tonight, let's dissect this entire debate. What are the pros and cons of freebies? And is there a middle ground? First of all, how do you define a freebie? For example, does cheap electricity count as a freebie? After all, you're all paying taxes. In the West, they don't call it freebies. They call it social security. You get free insurance, free health care, free schooling for your kids. And it is often called the cornerstone of a welfare state. But in India, freebies also mean something else. Like I said, free laptops, free electrical appliances. These are not part of any welfare scheme. They're part of the scheme to catch votes, sometimes with disastrous consequences. You might remember what happened in 2004. 21 people died in a stampede over freebies in the city of Lucknow in Uttar Pradesh. 21 people. Then opposition leader Lalji Tandon was distributing free saris to women. The rush was impossible to control. Pretty soon it spiraled into a stampede. Some politicians also hand out liquor to attract votes. Needless to say, that's not acceptable. But when it comes to other freebies, the verdict is not so clear. For example, sewing machines. The state of Tamil Nadu and Bihar, these states have given sewing machines to women. On paper, it is a freebie, yes, but the overall impact can be positive. Women in those states are using these machines to make money, to contribute to the economy and to sustain themselves. We could say the same about bicycles. In some cases, they offer mobility to the people who receive them. You can travel to work or school. They can transport small commodities. It's a win-win for everyone. Having said that, not all freebies end up the same way, and the reason is quite simple. You can teach a man how to fish. You can even give him a fishing rod. But unless he wants to fish, there's absolutely no point. And that is the downside of freebies. If you distribute 100 of them, maybe 10 will be put to use. The rest is wasteful expenditure for votes. How many states can afford that? In the West, money is not that big an issue. The population is low, tax payments are high, so social security is easy to provide. That's not the case with all Indian states. Some of them are already racking up a lot of debt, and freebies could push them over the edge. Also, don't forget the impact on elections. People are supposed to elect lawmakers based on their policies, not based on what brand of mixers they are offering. So freebies defeat the whole point of free and fair elections. Simply put, they muddy the waters. Which brings us to the Supreme Court's dilemma. What can be done now? First, we must differentiate between social security and freebie. Free saris, for example, is a freebie. Free education, perhaps not. It is an investment for the future. Free education. If the state can afford it, it must be provided. What about things like laptops and mixers? This is where distribution is more important than principle. Like I said, not everyone wants to fish. So find the people who actually want to and the people who actually can. They will make the right use of these freebies, and even then, one problem remains. Who will make the politicians understand their primary concern is winning elections? Managing the economy is secondary for most of them. And this is where election promises have to be studied better, perhaps even regulated, because if it sounds too good to be true, chances are it is. Over to Japan now, and there's a lot of buzz in Tokyo. A new minister has been appointed to fix Japan's falling birth rate. His name is Masanobu Ogura. Why was he picked for the job? He has no prior experience for this portfolio. He used to work for the Bank of Japan, and yet he was chosen. Ogura's claim to fame is a pregnancy belly. Our next report tells you more.
Masanobu Ogura knows how to make an impression. He is Japan's new minister for birth rate. How did he get the job? Maybe because of this stunt. Last year, Ogura tried out a pregnancy belly. This is a special suit. It weighs around 7 kilos. It is supposed to simulate what women experience during pregnancy. Ogura wore the suit for almost 2 days. He went to office with the pregnancy belly, even traveled in a crowded train. Back home, he tried to do some chores while keeping his suit on. Ogura later penned a blog about his experience. He developed a back pain while wearing the suit. Ogura was also worried about people bumping into him, especially when he was traveling in the train. Ogura ended his blog with a promise. He wanted to dedicate more time to supporting pregnant women in Japan. That cause will now be a full-time job for him. Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida recently reshuffled his cabinet. Ogura has been picked up. He is replacing Seiko Noda, a ruling party veteran. She had kicked up a storm last month with an interview. Seiko Noda had said Japan's politics is dominated by men. And they are indifferent about Japan's falling birth rate.
I don't think that the ultimate feminist would think of me as their supporter. If anything, I am a realist. There are a variety of reasons, but being in the parliament, I especially feel there is indifference and ignorance. For example, people say that children are our national treasure, and they say, yes, that's right. They say that women are important for gender equality, but this is just talk. The politics of this country and the politics of Japan will not move unless the problems of children and women are made visible.
A little over 2 weeks after that interview, Seiko Noda was dropped from the cabinet. But her statement brought attention to Japan's biggest problem, the falling birth rate. Last year, Japan reported around 810,000 new births. This is a record low. There are just 14.6 million children in Japan today, the lowest since 1950. Japan's government wants citizens to have more kids, but the people of Japan don't want to have children. Many women don't want to shoulder the responsibility of childcare. Men, too, are afraid of having kids. They feel it is costly and exhausting to raise them. It is one of the reasons why 1 out of 4 Japanese citizens don't want to get married. Experts are now warning about the long-term consequences. Over 36% of Japanese citizens are above the age of 65. An aging society would hurt Japan's economy. It could cause labor shortages and even an economic slowdown. Masanobu Ogura has been tasked with reversing the fall in Japan's birth rate. It will be a difficult assignment and will need more than a pregnancy belly act.
Our final story is about climate change. Scientists have tried explaining it for years. They've given lectures, they've published papers, but none of it has really moved our world leaders. Maybe pictures will. Take a look at the first set. It may look like a desert, but it's not. What you're looking at is a reservoir in Spain. 84% empty. You can see the paddle boats and water slides abandoned nearby. Aquatic life driven to death. The reason? Climate change. Spain had its hottest July since 1961. Some parts of the Iberian Peninsula are at their driest in 1200 years. Let that sink in. 1200 years. Now for the next set of pictures. What you're looking at is Italy's longest river, River Po. Large sandbanks have started appearing around it. Why? Again, climate change. This region is facing its worst drought in 70 years. As the river pulled back, it revealed some ghosts of the past, like this one, a bomb from World War II. The device was found by fishermen in the region. They called in the army, which carried out a controlled explosion. Now we go to France. You see those beautiful sand plains? What if I told you those are not plains? What you're looking at is a dried up river. Not a single drop of water remains. All the tourist boats have been beached as a result. The restaurants nearby have nearly shut. The reason? Our next set of pictures will give you an idea. Wildfires are raging across southwestern France. Nearly 6,000 hectares of forests have been burnt. This blaze follows 2 wildfires in the month of July. Put together, they scorched more than 20,000 hectares. What do these pictures tell you? A crisis of biblical proportions. You've seen the pictures, now let me show you the data. 63% of land in Britain and Europe is facing drought. 63%. That's almost the size of India. 46% of the land is under warning. 17% under a state of alert. It's a perfect climate storm. The rains have reduced to a trickle. The temperatures have hit multi-decade highs. As a result, Europe's rivers are drying. The reservoirs barely have any water left. And the situation is the same across the continent. Southern England had its driest July since 1836. Overall, it was Britain's driest July in 20 years. The government has declared amber alert for the next 4 days. Temperatures are so high, it could trigger fires. In France, they already have. It was their driest July since records began in 1959. 3 countries breached 40 degrees Celsius last month: Spain, France, and the UK. Now remember, we're talking about Europe. Their summers are supposed to be pleasant and cheery. It's supposed to be the travel season. Instead, Europe is literally baking.
We haven't analyzed fully the event because it is still ongoing. But based on my experience, I think that this is perhaps even more extreme than the 2018. Just to give you an idea, the 2018 drought was so extreme that looking back at least the last 500 years, there were no other events similar to the drought of 2018. But this year, I think it is really worse than the 2018.
This drought has serious economic consequences. You see, rivers in Europe are not just vital ecosystems, they're transport routes. They carry around 1 ton of freight per citizen every year. Total value more than $80 billion, 80. But right now, those rivers look like this. Those are the mighty rivers of Europe, now reduced to dried sand beds. Without their water, Europe cannot grow food, it cannot transport cargo, it cannot even generate electricity. Western Europe's hydropower output was down 20% in the second quarter of this year. How is Europe planning to tackle this crisis? Each government has announced its own measures. France, for instance, has set up a crisis team. Their main priority is ensuring drinking water. Reports say 100 French municipalities are short of drinking water. Italy has declared a drought emergency. Water rationing has been announced in cities like Verona and Pisa. Rice production has been hit. Farmers are unable to produce enough rice for the famous Italian risotto. The Netherlands has declared a nationwide water shortage. People have been asked to take quicker showers, also not to wash their cars or water their gardens. In Germany, all the focus is on the Rhine. It is the financial heartbeat of Germany. You see, the Rhine requires a basic water level to support shipping. If it falls below that, ships cannot pass. Germany says it is days away from falling below that level. Freight ships are already sailing at 25% capacity. If this is not an emergency, I don't know what is. The pictures, the data, the testimonies, all of them hint at a climate emergency in Europe. It is not some distant threat anymore. It is very much here. And as we prepare to enter the winter season, more questions remain. Yes, the heat will disappear, but what climatic shock will winter behold? Now let's take a look at what else is making news across the world. It's time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
China has blocked a move by India and the US to list Pakistan-based Jaish-e-Mohammed leader Abdul Rauf Azhar as a global terrorist at the UN Security Council. The second time Beijing has resorted to such a step in less than 2 months. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un declared victory over COVID-19 as his sister indicated that he too caught the virus, while blaming neighboring South Korea for causing the outbreak. A British man accused of being part of an Islamic State kidnap and murder cell known as the Beatles was remanded in custody on terrorism charges after Turkey deported him to the UK. 2 terrorists attempting to infiltrate an Indian army camp in Jammu and Kashmir are killed. 3 soldiers also lose their life in the gunfight. At least 2 police officers and 1 civilian died after a day of anti-government protests in Sierra Leone's capital, Freetown, as protesters threw rocks and burned tires out of frustration at worsening economic hardship. The International Energy Agency says global oil demand will rise more than previously forecast this year as heat waves and soaring gas prices are prompting countries to switch fuels for power generation. A monster wildfire rages for the 3rd consecutive day in France's southwest. Macron says 5 more European allies provide help for firefighters battling 8 wildfires across the country. Satellite images show Antarctica's coastal glaciers are shedding icebergs more rapidly than nature can replenish the crumbling ice, doubling previous estimates of losses from the world's largest ice sheet. Karim Benzema scored his 324th goal for Real Madrid as the UEFA Champions League winners beat Europa League champions Eintracht Frankfurt 2-0 to win their 5th Super Cup. The goal further enhanced the Frenchman's claim for a maiden Ballon d'Or. Benzema scored 44 goals and lifted 2 trophies last season.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks for watching.